Recently, I was having a conversation with a viewer via comments on one of my videos, and the viewer was asking about different personality types, cognitive functions, and whatnot. And I made the comment that a person, many people, can have the same cognitive function, let's say extroverted thinking, but that it comes out very differently in the person whose brain prioritizes using extroverted thinking. You know, if your brain makes that one of your first one or two processes, for people who like to use the term function stack, if it's your first or second function, but if your brain prioritizes making extroverted thinking one of your first couple of processes, then when you are using that cognitive function, it's going to come out very differently than it does for the person whose brain says, let's run this situation through the lens of extroverted thinking after we've already run it through 2 or 3 other processes. And I said something to the effect of, the lower use cognitive functions, the third and especially the fourth cognitive function, that fourth process that your brain applies, let's say, and that's not exactly how it works, I'm oversimplifying, but if it is your fourth function, it's going to look weird. And then the question was posed to me, well, what does that look like? What does weird look like? Now, the difficulty here is that weird looks different depending on the person. Everybody's weird looks a little different. And weird looks different depending on the cognitive function. So weird introverted intuition is not going to be anywhere near the same as weird extroverted thinking, which is not going to be anywhere near the same as weird introverted sensing or any of the other cognitive functions. They're all going to look different in their weird state, and they're going to look different in each individual who uses them in a weird state. But let me try to explain to you what I'm talking about. When a person is having to do what their first or second cognitive function is designed for, that person does that thing in a flow state. He or she is comfortable, calm, is not being overly taxed emotionally, energetically, perhaps physically. That person takes that task and just immediately is like, yeah, this is why I was put on earth. This is what I was designed for. I can do this all day long. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to have wild emotional swings whenever I have to use this cognitive function. I'm not going to have sudden outbursts. I'm not going to behave in a way that people look at me and go, well, that's not his or her normal way of behaving. None of those things are going to happen because I'm in a flow state. I'm using the cognitive functions that my brain is always using on autopilot, and I have no trouble with them. I don't feel taxed, and I'm just good to go. And anybody watching me go through whatever it is that I'm going through, when those are the cognitive functions that are being called upon, would see me as being someone who's just even keeled, running on their base program. No problem at all. But when I am called upon to use a lower cognitive function, especially that last cognitive function, I am going to not be in a flow state. I'm going to find myself stressed. I'm going to find myself taxed beyond likely what I'm capable of, or at least what I feel comfortable doing, the amount of exertion that I feel comfortable putting forth. And so when we find ourselves having to use that lower cognitive function, or either of the two lowest ones, but really that fourth one especially, it's going to come out weird. Now, to whom will it look weird? It may look weird to people who know us well. Now, that person may have seen us use that cognitive function a lot and be like, oh, I know what's going on here. Every time this person has to do anything in this realm of existence, that person becomes overly emotional or angry or has a breakdown, or you can tell they're stressed beyond all get out. They act strange. They might speak in different patterns or issue peculiar laughter that is not their norm and doesn't make any sense. They may express overwhelming, oh my gosh, emotion, whereas normally they're very even keel. Anything along those lines. Who else will it look weird to? It'll look weird to people who use that exact same cognitive function, but as their first or second function, maybe even their third. They might look at you like, if I had to do the exact same thing that you're having to do, I, with my higher version of that cognitive function, would be in a flow state. I wouldn't be freaking out the way you are. I wouldn't be stressed the way you are. I wouldn't be losing my mind the way you are. I wouldn't be acting so different than I normally act because I would be doing it in a flow state. Who else might it look odd to? Well, it's going to, a lot of cognitive functions are always going to look odd to the person who has the introverted extroverted flip. So a person with extroverted thinking is frequently going to think that introverted thinking looks weird, or vice versa. But the more you span those, the weirder it's going to look. So someone with high extroverted thinking might see someone with low introverted thinking look really strange when that person is having to put that introverted thinking into practice. Not only will it just always look a little weird because it's the introverted opposite, but the high extroverted thinking person is going to be like, when I'm forced to apply myself to the figuring out of a task like this, I don't lose my mind. I am in a flow state. I'm good. But you, because your fourth function is introverted thinking, because your thinking function is last, you're looking a little weird. I don't know what you're doing. I think it's peculiar. Now, let me give you some examples that I've seen in my life. I saw an example with a particular actor who had his feeling function being his last function. And feeling is very much about values and likes and things like that. And it was one of these interviews where he's got like a board with a bunch of Google questions on it, but the back half of the question is covered up. So it'd say like, does this person, and then he peels off the sticker and it would have the rest of the question and he would answer it. And he was going through and just being like, does this actor blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yes, I do this. And this is how that worked. And then peels off the next one. Oh yeah, I remember that when that happened, and this is how that went, and so on and so forth. He goes through 5 or 6 questions, and then all of a sudden he gets to one that's like, does this person like this thing? Now we're getting into his feeling function, which is his last function, and all of a sudden he lets out this extremely weird, cackling, giddy little giggle that I'm like, what the heck was that? That was weird. I've been watching the video for 8 minutes, right? And I've gotten a baseline on him. He answers questions in a flow state that don't require him to touch on his emotions, his feelings, his values, and he's just very normal, right? Just sounds normal. There's nothing about it. You would never be able to pick out his cognitive functions or his type based on the first 8 minutes of the video. And then all of a sudden, when he's asked to do something with his feelings, his values, his likes, he acts so weird. He's just issuing forth an extremely peculiar laugh. And then he answered a few more questions, and then he got another one like that. And again, this uncontrollable, high-pitched, cackling laugh comes out before he can answer the question. Another example, I'll give you my own. With my extroverted thinking as my fourth function, a lot of times when I have to do anything in the world that requires me to use that extroverted thinking to really apply it, I get very serious. I tend to speak very matter-of-factly. I tend to speak a little louder than normal. I'm always kind of a loud person, which I hate about myself. I become easily agitated, very emotional. Nobody should bother me. I don't want anybody talking to me. I'm trying to accomplish a task. Can't you see that I'm trying to accomplish a task? Why are you talking to me? And that's how I act. Now, we contrast that with an ESTJ who has extroverted thinking first, or even for example, my ESFP daughter has extroverted thinking third. when they're doing tasks that require their extroverted thinking, they don't look like the world is crashing down all around them. They're just in a flow state. Now, my daughter, who's an ESFP and has it as her third function, maybe not complete flow state, but for the ESTJ, for an ISTJ, these people are they're going to be in their flow state when they have to use TE. It's not going to look weird. They're not going to be losing their mind. They're not going to look overly exhausted, overly stressed, any of these things. Now, does that mean that the ESTJ loves work? No. It doesn't mean that the ESTJ gets up every morning and is like, yay, I get to go to work and TE all day. No, it doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that they can. The ESTJ can exercise or apply that muscle all day long in a flow state and not get exhausted. Might not love it, might rather be at the beach or doing something else, but it won't cause that person to go crazy. Everybody around that person is not going to be looking at him like, what the heck is going on with you? I can tell you that I have people in my life who have extroverted feeling as their last function, and they're generally both very even-keeled people. And their emotions don't leak out much. And then all of a sudden, there's an emotional situation. And one of them will either become like dead silent or go like crazy cackling laughter or talking about other people, extroverted feeling, talking about other people and their problems and their emotions and their needs in ways that make me, now I'm introverted feeling, so it's going to look weird to me no matter what, but I'm also feeling first. So when I see this come out, I'm like, that's weird. And then the other one will oftentimes show almost no emotion, almost no emotion, almost no emotion. And then all of a sudden some little thing will happen that to me seems like it's not that big of a deal. These are the kind of things that we process. I process emotion all day, every day. It's not a big deal. And then this person will have a sudden like tidal wave, an overflow of emotion that needs to be expressed and comes out very over the top, very, oh my gosh. And it's really fascinating and endearing in some ways, but weird. For a lead feeler like myself, seeing someone who has feeling forth suddenly have a tidal wave of emotion is kind of like, that's weird. I didn't see that coming. And so it is. You can apply this with any of the cognitive functions. To the person who has that cognitive function higher, when the person who has it last is using it, they're going to look weird. To the person who has the general category of cognitive function higher. So like a feeling first person is going to see a feeling fourth person. And when that feeling fourth person has to use that emotion or delve into that world of values and likes and so on and so forth, as a feeling first person, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to go, that's weird. And so also the people around you who know you, who see you every day, they know what causes you to suddenly not be you. Right? Like you run at a baseline. You have a normal. When you're in your flow state, primarily existing on your top 2 or 3 cognitive functions all day long, everything's going fine and everything that you're required to do only requires you to really use those top 2 functions, touching on the third a bit and very, very rarely using that fourth. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, you're given a task, something happens and you have to apply that fourth function. Everyone around you knows when that is required of you, you get weird. You lose your mind, you clearly look stressed, all kinds of anxiety, your emotions might go insane, or you might go from somebody like me, I typically tend to be more emotional, and then I become like robot. You know, when I have to go into my TE, I'm like, all the emotion has to go away, all the feelings, the values, the likes, everything has to go away, and I'm in robot mode. And everybody who knows me would look at me and be like, you're not normally a robot, but now you are. Whereas the high TI people are like, you are normally a robot, and all of a sudden you're like gushing tears of joy and hugging everybody in the room, and everybody looks at you and goes, that's weird. Why is it weird? because that muscle is weak for you. It's unpracticed. It's not primarily what you were put here for, although you should learn to be better at it and exercise it. And you're weak there. And so when you have to use that muscle, you look weird to people who don't have trouble using that muscle, to people who know you well, to people who use that category of muscle on a regular basis and see you struggling to use it the 1 or 2 times that you ever do because you try to avoid it at all costs. That's what I mean by weird. It looks different to everybody. It looks different in everybody, the way it comes out. But if you pay attention, you can clearly see it. Someone's demeanor suddenly just flips and they're a whole different person from who they are 70, 80, 90% of the time. Anyway, I hope this helps you to understand a little bit about your lowest cognitive function and why, when you are forced to use it, especially until you mature with it a little better, but probably your whole life no matter what, you'll look a little weird.